Hiya, welcome to the cave. So for the first series on this channel, let's go straight for the challenge. Let's do the Star Drake. First things first, let's get it built and primed. Now, I've never built a model this complex before, and I did have a few issues, which I'll go through in just a second. Now, I've wanted a Star Drake as part of my army for a very long time. And the reason that I've never bought one is because I think I suffer from a mindset that a lot of people suffer from. When you see these larger models on the gaming table, they receive a lot of attention. And when a model is under that much scrutiny, ideally you want the paintwork to look like what it does on the front of the box. But certainly my painting skills are nowhere near that. And I've often been scared of painting these models because I'm not going to do it justice. But recently I feel that my painting has kind of reached a plateau and I don't really see any great improvements, and I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So I thought, now it's time for a challenge. Let's get a Star Drake and let's see what we can do. Once it was built, I primed the whole model in Vallejo's grey primer, and then on the wings I applied a base coat of Vallejo black to the skin and the ribs, and the membranes were painted in Citadel's corn red. So I thought I'd share a couple of tips with you should you decide to get one of these models for yourself and have a go at painting yourself. Things that I've learned in the build and paint process so far. Number one, do not attach the model to the base. The model itself is quite large. You can certainly pick it up without any issues, but it's quite a large base, and getting to some of those details underneath it when the base is on, I think is going to be a little bit difficult. So tip one, don't attach the model to the base. Tip number two, don't apply the armor plating to the model at the start. By the armor plating, I mean these parts and the chest plate as well. I've done it. There's no way I can take these off without damaging the model, but now it's going to make getting to certain parts of this model an absolute nightmare for paint. So tip two, don't attach the armor plates. Tip number three, don't attach the wings. There's a couple of reasons for this, and the first one is just going to be general handling. With the wings attached, this model is going to be a nightmare to move around in your hands. And the second one is pretty much the same as for not applying the armor plates. With the wings on it, getting the paintbrush to certain areas is going to be an absolute nightmare. So do yourself a favor, don't attach them. Tip four is for the miniature that rides the Star Drake. Now, the instructions will tell you to build the miniature and then put it on the chair, which is how I did it. But I found that the locating tabs between the torso and the legs were very faint. And when I actually came to sit the miniature on the chair, what I found was this fancy cloak was actually getting caught on the seat itself, and it wouldn't allow the miniature to sit down properly. I then had to basically rip it apart and try again. So my advice to you, if you get one of these and you come to build this miniature, is build the legs on the chair. Build the torso separately and then put them together, and that way you shouldn't run into that problem. Originally, I had hoped to get some close-up shots of the painting and the airbrushing process, but unfortunately, as I record these videos on a couple of mobile phones on tripods, that proved to be a bit more difficult than I thought. If I put the tripod on the desk, just me working on the desk is enough to move the camera and throw all the shots out. And if I put the tripod, say, behind me and then try and film over my shoulder zoomed in, the camera, it looked like it was trying to autofocus, even if I put it on a manual focus, and it would pulse, and it just ruined every single shot. So I only got the distant shots, and in the end, to be honest, I just gave up. So there's quite a lot that I've done that isn't actually caught on camera. I think I found a way around it. So future episodes, I'm hoping that we can get some decent close-up shots. I was actually quite pleased with the transitions that I managed to achieve with the airbrush. They weren't perfect, but I thought for my first go, they weren't actually too bad. The problem really started happening with the highlights. Now, if we come down, I'll show you a wing and I'll show you exactly what I mean. As you can see, you get raised areas and recessed areas on the wing. Now the recessed areas aren't too much of a problem, just a bit of Nuln Oil on a paintbrush, run it down the recess and you're all good. But with the raised areas, I found that my hands aren't steady enough to follow that down with the point of a paintbrush. I tried using the side of a paintbrush, but then I found that at some point, because there's so many of them, I would make a mistake and I would get paint actually on the membrane of the wing. Now, if it's in a bright red area, which is basically pure corn red, it's not too much of a problem. If it's in a black area, which is Vallejo black, again, not too much of a problem. But if you manage to get it wrong and it gets it on a halfway between the blend, that is a bit of a problem. And if I tried to fix it, it went wrong, it looked bad, and every time I tried to fix it, it was like a snowball effect. Every time I tried to fix it, it would just look worse and worse and worse. In the end, I decided to bite the bullet and start again. Now, because I'm working in such thin layers, I didn't actually need to strip the wing and start again from scratch. I could just respray the whole thing. So I resprayed the whole thing in corn red and then sprayed in the ribs in between the membranes with Vallejo black. This is actually the end results. I'm quite pleased with them again. Not perfect, but pretty good for a second attempt. But I think that this area between the rib and the membrane, this faded area, I still feel it's a bit too thick. It's too dark to too red. The join is still quite quick. There still seems to be more of a line rather than a transition. So I think the next stage is to just go back with the airbrush and the corn red and just make those transitions a little bit better and a little bit narrower. Well, that's it for this episode. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and if you didn't, don't forget to comment and subscribe. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode when we're going to be testing out the new camera rig, so hopefully we can get some nice close-up shots. I'm going to be having a third attempt with the airbrush to try and narrow down that transition between the black and the red on the wings, and hopefully the highlights aren't going to give me the same amount of grief that they did last time. I'll see you then.